Hello everybody and welcome to the Carl and Cymru revision sessions. The session this evening will focus on GCSE health and social care and will be presented by Mrs Lewis from e-sgol Gofyn Cymru. The session will last around 45 minutes where Mrs Lewis will run through the relevant content. If you have any questions during the session, please use the question and answer section and we'll do our best to answer your questions. You'll see that a hyperlink in the Q&A section for you to complete an online form. If you're happy to leave your name and email address, we'd love you to keep in touch with you so that we can send you information about our future events. You can click on the link at any time during the session. Today's session will be recorded and the recording and any relevant resources will be uploaded to the e-sgol website under the Carl and Cymru tab. Thank you, Mrs Lewis, over to you.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm not sure whether some of you joined my session last week, where we looked at the areas of development, growth, and obviously development. Today now we're going to be moving on to the factors which affect our growth and development. There are a number of factors which can affect our growth and development, but today we're going to begin with the physical factors that can affect our growth and development. Okay. So as you can see from the specification on your screens now, the physical factors include genetic inheritance. So what is genetically passed on to us from our parents. We will be looking at diet, nutrition and hydration, which includes breastfeeding, bottle feeding and weaning babies. We will also be looking at the different types of physical activities and the benefits of exercise. Compared to doing little or no exercise. Also, we'll be looking at the opportunities for play, the experiences where then the people have of illnesses and diseases and disability. So we've got quite a large content here, and hopefully we will get through this all this evening. I normally begin with a question, so I'm not asking you to answer this question right now. The hope is that after my maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes of delivery, we can return to this question and you will gain confidence in the content and also maybe thinking about a structure to your answer rather than perhaps diving in and maybe you have 2 or 3 valid points where you're going to gain maybe 2 or 3 marks, but then fall short and not achieve the full 6. Okay, so the question that we're going to look at later on is discuss how diet could affect a child's physical development. I'm not going to give you any more indication as to how to go about this as yet. Okay, I'm going to deliver now the content from the specification, obviously revising these as quickly as possible, but also ensuring that we have that understanding, and then we will return to this slide. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to look at today is, do we understand what is inheritance? Okay, so inheritance is nothing to do with money and what you inherit financially from your family members or friends. Inheritance is something physical that obviously is passed down to us through our genes. Okay, now sometimes the inheritance is just physical characteristics. In terms of perhaps how we look, our height, our body build, etc. But obviously we can inherit then genetic disorders. Now there are genetic disorders in the specification that my students in school have actually looked at. I would suggest that you look at these genetic disorders as possibly a question could arise on how these genetic disorders or a certain genetic disorder can affect your growth and development and well-being. Okay, so just perhaps to help you with your understanding, can we think of physical characteristics we can inherit? Okay, so these can be anything perhaps from hair colour, eye colour, height, like I said, body shape, whether we have freckles, our eye shape, our perhaps jawline, so things that perhaps just make us look similar to our parents. Okay, obviously then we have genetic disorders, and possibly your parents could be a carrier of a certain gene. Because of their genetic makeup, obviously that is then passed down to you through biology, okay, and then there are 8 disorders from the specification. There are far more than 8 disorders from the specification, okay, and we need to perhaps have an understanding of each of these, okay. It's quite interesting to look at them, okay, and also it's quite interesting to appreciate how these disorders can perhaps marginally affect an individual's life or has a major impact on their day-to-day life, okay. There's a nice website where you can, I think it's called genes.co.uk. I should know that off the top of my head. It's just a link that I have off school, I do apologise. Where they give real life stories of individuals who have these disorders and how it affects them. In school then, what I get individuals to do is look at how does it affect them physically, intellectually, emotionally, socially, because obviously of the difficulties that they have, okay. Again, that's fairly easy for you to go and research yourselves rather than me spending perhaps the whole session tonight on just the 8 disorders, okay. We can also then look at diet and nutrition, okay. So obviously if we are following a healthy diet, and perhaps what the positive effects are in terms of perhaps our energy, our mood, our skin, you could perhaps say bone density, our sleeping patterns, obviously maintaining a healthy weight. So there are many positive effects of diet and nutrition. A lot of mistakes I see when a question on diet is asked. Individuals assume that somebody is on a diet, okay, and this is not the case. What we're looking at here is, in terms of diet, what do you eat on a day-to-day basis, and not being on a specific diet. So we need to remember that, especially when obviously you have perhaps a higher value mark, a 6, 8, 10 marker on diet, because if you talk about a certain diet, it's not going to get you then the top marks, okay. Obviously then there are negative effects of diet and nutrition. So if I eat a poor diet, possibly this could lead to a number of different problems which are quite severe. They could be physical problems, they could be perhaps emotional and social problems just because of what I'm eating. Okay, so examples that I have on the screen, obviously obesity, perhaps diabetes, mobility problems, sleep interruption. Maybe I'm really sad and unhappy in myself. I feel quite fragile, quite lonely, perhaps because I'm avoiding certain situations and activities, possibly because I have gained weight and I don't feel that I want to attend certain occasions. So we need to ensure when we're looking at diet and nutrition, are you comfortable in the physical effects, the intellectual effects, possibly emotional and social effects of diet, okay. Then we have breastfeeding, okay, and in the specification there is information in there in terms of how breastfeeding is advantageous to the baby, okay. So obviously we're getting more antibodies in the mother's milk, okay, which will protect and give us a better immunity. There's less risk of vomiting, loose bowels, constipation, nappy rash and eczema, okay. What I get individuals to do in class with myself is maybe draw a diagram of a baby and picture of a baby, and then they can label the baby in terms of, right, if this baby was breastfed, what would be the positives to them solely as a baby, okay. And I think sometimes having maybe a photo of a baby and then labeling it is likely to stick in your brain far better than a list of words that is on the screen at the moment. Breastfeeding obviously has many advantages to the mother as well. Moms sometimes choose to breastfeed just because of the benefits to themselves. Okay, so this could be perhaps less risk of ovarian cancer, less risk of having obesity, cardiovascular disease. A lot of mums perhaps choose to breastfeed also because they feel that they can shift that extra baby weight a little bit quicker. maybe our natural assumption would be, well, it's easier. If you're going to say it's easier, then you need to explain why, okay, in terms of perhaps sterilising the bottles, preparing, obviously having to heat the milk up, having to prepare bottles before you leave the house, possibly as well, okay. And then a term then, weaning, okay. The purpose of weaning is obviously introducing solid foods to the baby. The main purpose that we want to wean a baby is to make sure that they don't have any allergies, and then we gradually introduce a variety of different foods to them, just to ensure they can tolerate these foods. Okay, they include obviously cow's milk, eggs, nuts, seeds, fish, and shellfish. A little bit of common sense with weaning. Obviously, we're not just going to be giving them large amounts of, for example, milk. So I wouldn't just completely transfer the breast milk or maybe formula milk to cow's milk. It's just a slow introduction to things. And then when we are introducing solid food, obviously that then has to be purified. So it's a very soft texture for the baby to be able to cope with swallowing. Okay. But the main reason, obviously, we're weaning an individual is to make sure that they can grow and continue to develop, and also just to be aware of any allergies that they might have. Play then is something that's connected with factors that can affect our physical development. So if you can imagine that you had a baby, toddler, child in your house, and they didn't have the opportunity to play, there would be several shortcomings then to their physical development. Okay, so what we want to ensure when individuals can play is, are we aware of the contributing factors towards their PIE's development? Okay, so obviously physical, intellectual, emotional, and social development. So if we're talking about a child which has the opportunity to play outside, okay, this can be maybe in a park, in a playgroup, perhaps which has a outdoor facility. The main purpose of this really is that they're getting some sort of cardiovascular health. Okay, so they may be trying to ride a tricycle, they may be walking back and forth with buckets of water, sand. Okay, but because they're outdoor and it's hopefully more of an open area, obviously their heart and their lungs are going to work a little bit harder. This will obviously help them then burn energy, okay, so they can keep a steady weight. It will improve then their gross motor skills, and this was covered last week. Gross motor skills are skills which involve the larger muscles of the body. So perhaps they could be throwing a ball, they could be kicking a ball, and they could perhaps even be using a balance spike. It also helps them then with their self-confidence, so which is an emotional development, and obviously with their movement and coordination. The difference then may be between outdoor play and indoor play. Indoor play, perhaps we look a little bit more on their fine motor skills, so activities that we do indoors. So maybe arts and crafts, building, Lego, jigsaws, colouring, and possibly working with blocks, and just generally playing more perhaps in a confined space where we haven't got the range to be using our large muscles like we would if it was a gross motor skill. There are perhaps different benefits for indoor play compared to outdoor play. So maybe we'd be trying to use our brain a little bit more with perhaps solving problems with a puzzle or a jigsaw, or building blocks, for example. And obviously then it will improve our mental health and resilience. So if I'm building the blocks and the blocks fall down, have I got that capacity to go back and just start again? And am I perhaps a determined character just to keep plodding through despite perhaps somebody who's coming along and kicking it down for whatever reason? Also then in physical factors, is illnesses and diseases. Okay, this could be done as a little project perhaps by yourselves. Okay, you could put this perhaps on an A3 piece of paper where there are obviously several long-term illnesses and diseases, and again what you need from these examples are, if I was to suffer, for example, from asthma, how this then would affect me in terms of my pies. Okay, this is quite an enjoyable task. This can be done as creative as you want, but it is perhaps important for you to get to grips with all the long-term problems that appear in the specification. And like I say, can you just create that A3 perhaps poster that's a little bit more interactive rather than just having facts down, which is hard to revise. Okay. So what we're looking at here then is how possibly does it affect your growth, and perhaps participation in certain activities, attendance in perhaps school, if we're talking about obviously a child or an adolescent. Do we have to perhaps attend hospital regularly, which perhaps affects our work patterns? Have we got poor mental health because we're finding it hard to actually deal with the effects of the illnesses and diseases? Okay. We have more kind of common short-term problems then, okay, so like tonsillitis, coughs and colds, and perhaps loose bowels, where obviously when these occur, they're not very pleasant. However, the effects are more short-term as well. Problems perhaps we have with short-term illnesses or diseases is if they occur regularly. Okay, so again, this could affect attendance in school or possibly your workplace. You're finding it hard to pin a job down. There are intellectual perhaps problems then, just because you're not taking on the information that you need to for perhaps further in your career within a certain area. And obviously the social developments then, perhaps with missing out with your friendship groups, perhaps there's celebrations that you're not attending, and then eventually perhaps you don't get invited to these things. Okay, so again, just perhaps a little poster for you to complete there in terms of okay, if I did have tonsillitis, how would this affect me? Just so you're confident really with that content. Okay. There's obviously then disability. Okay, now there are 3 types of disabilities. Okay, there are sensory disabilities, physical disabilities, and then learning disabilities. Now each one of these, obviously depending on how severe they are, can affect an individual. Again, there are several websites there that will give you information. The WJC themselves actually have a very good website where they have 3 case studies of individuals who are blind and deaf, also an individual who has dwarfism, and how this then affects them. Okay, now normally these questions are higher tariff mark questions. So we need to be having a bank of options here in terms of if an individual had autism, how would this affect them in general? Okay, so if we're looking at perhaps what we're looking at is the pies development. Okay, and are we aware of the different options that we could provide in terms of pies? Maybe you could look at also the positive effects of suffering. Okay, so they haven't just got to be negative. It depends on how the question is actually given to you. So here we can see now the question that I previously shown you a couple of slides ago. This now has been revisited just because I would hope now that you had a little bit better understanding on that we're not looking at just being on a diet. Okay, the key things perhaps to look at this question here also is that we're talking about a child's physical development. Okay, I would have a number of students who perhaps do not read that question enough, and I would get answers then which include the 4 aspects. Okay, and obviously then they're incorrect in doing that because this is asking for the physical development. Hopefully you've identified that it says affect. Now it doesn't say in a positive or negative way. So even though that we're just restricted to only supplying answers which concentrates on physical development, we could look at, well, what is actually positive here and what is actually negative here. Okay, now every time a question occurs, perhaps where there's 4, 6 marks, I always ask my students, do you have a structure? Do you know exactly how you're going to answer this? And possibly in the column that you have there, you will write your ideas and you can tick them off as you're answering, rather than, like I said previously, you've got 2 or 3 good answers. Yeah, I'm just going to start my question with these, and then maybe struggle and repeat yourself further down the in your answer. Okay, so the first thing perhaps that we will look at today then is the positive, or are the positive aspects of a diet. Okay, so if I'm following or having a balanced diet, okay, I could hopefully prevent any future diseases from occurring. Okay, you could talk about possibly that individual having improved skin. Okay, you could talk about their bones being perhaps denser and their teeth, okay, not perhaps having so many problems with bacteria, fillings, etc. Obviously, we could talk about maintaining a healthy weight. Okay, we have a better immune system where we can fight off infection. We have better energy, okay, or more energy, I should say, and hopefully our sleep patterns are improved. Okay, now if you were to just provide me with those answers, okay, I would give you a 6 out of 6 if you've discussed them. Okay, there's no real need to be giving negative points as well as all of these. Okay, however, individuals perhaps would prefer to give negative points as well as positive points, so they're ensuring that they are given kind of a balanced answer. Okay, so the things that we could talk about here are that I could possibly become overweight if I'm not eating a healthy diet. Okay, I could possibly have problems with my mobility. Okay, I could have respiratory problems, maybe problems with my teeth in terms of tooth decay. Okay, several visits to the dentists. Okay, maybe additional work that doesn't really need to be done. You could talk about possibly having diabetes because of your increased sugar levels. Okay, and then maybe low energy. And obviously then you could talk about your sleeping patterns being slightly disturbed. Okay, and there we have several, okay, physical answers, and not one of them is exposing myself to intellectual, emotional, social, which is obviously going to be incorrect. Okay, so that structure at the beginning for me is key, just to make sure that you're actually answering the question that's been delivered to you, rather than just rushing in thinking, oh yeah, I'll just talk about this. Okay, so a clear structure to your answers. Okay, right. Moving on, we are now then going to look at the interdependence between physical health and good mental health. Okay, so why does perhaps physical activity have an effect on us, both perhaps immediately and the long term? And can we think of obviously physical benefits of being active, but also mental health benefits of being active? Okay. We're going to follow a similar pattern here in terms of, right, this is the question that we're going to revisit. At the moment, do we feel confident in our answer? Okay, it's a 4 marker. It's asking for our social and emotional health because an individual is attending classes. Okay, so previously I've given you perhaps an idea on how to go about making a structure to questions. Okay, I'm not going to say too much, but this is what we've got to be looking at, and then we need to be eliminating depending on the question that's actually asked. Okay, so Alan is 68 years old, he has recently divorced. Since the divorce, he attends exercise classes with his friends 3 times a week. Many experts believe that regular exercise is important to overall well-being. Explain the social and emotional benefits that attending exercise classes with his friends could have on Alan. Okay, just going to leave it there. I'm now going to deliver revision, perhaps ideas on this topic, and then we're going to return to the question. Okay, so obviously in terms of exercise, what we're looking at here is what are the physical effects or physical benefits. Okay, we're looking at perhaps, obviously we've got healthier organs, healthier maybe joints, muscles, bones, because of this exercise, and we're less likely to suffer from certain illnesses and diseases. We've got better, more energy, and we're sleeping better. Our cardiovascular fitness improves. We're maintaining that healthy weight and less likely perhaps of suffering from diabetes. And obviously this is just the physical effects of exercise. Then if we think of ourselves in terms of, right, when I go to the gym, how do I perhaps feel in terms of my mental health? You could say perhaps you get a little release from your situation. You tend to worry less for that duration of time. Perhaps you can kind of solve your problems in your mind when you're actually exercising. So it's a good way of just perhaps getting away from your problems. It can improve your confidence, especially perhaps if you're hitting, I don't know, maybe some milestones, maybe PBs, maybe you're losing weight, you're feeling your body shape is changing. And like I said, it just clears the mind in general. And then there are obviously then emotional and social benefits. So perhaps we are making friends. A lot of people tend to jump into the social benefits. Oh, they'll meet new people, which is completely correct. However, we're about spending valuable time with our existing friends. It's a time to socialise, it's a time to connect with people and perhaps share your problems, and just having a good old chat sometimes will make you feel a lot better because you've expressed perhaps your concerns and you've been given some solid advice on what to do next. Okay, it's obviously very enjoyable. You feel part of perhaps a community, a club, especially if you're attending perhaps the same exercise classes at the same time, and people will notice that you're there, and perhaps if you don't attend, they will give you a message, oh, I miss you tonight, and that makes you feel part of a community, and your just general mood then will improve. Okay, so if we then look at this question that obviously was given to us previously, I wrote down here what about the structure, okay, in terms of positive and negative effects of exercise classes. Okay, now reading this question, I have to eliminate physical because it doesn't ask for that. I have to eliminate then the intellectual also, so I'm left with emotional and social. And what you could arguably say then is explain social, emotional and health benefits that attending exercise classes with his friends could have on Alan. Okay, when I see that word benefits, I have to get rid of anything that's negative. Okay, so as you can see, my options of answers is drastically reduced. Okay, the students who are perhaps who read questions thoroughly, okay, will completely understand that, whereas some will rush the question because perhaps of nerves, and then they'll start talking about perhaps the physical benefits of exercise and they're not getting anywhere with their answer. Okay, so please take that time just to do that simple structure at the side. Okay, so if we're talking first of all of the social benefits, okay, you could talk about you have contact with a variety of people. Okay, this can be obviously meeting your new friends. Okay, but as I previously said, what about your old friends? Okay, what about having that time where you actually engage in a conversation with people who perhaps have known you for a considerable amount of time, and they can offer you perhaps some advice. So please don't forget about your old friends when a question like this comes up. Okay, you could also talk about the fact that you're not lonely. Okay, you're not having to deal with your problems on your own, and maybe you could talk about the fact that you're starting now to feel part of a community where you're attending exercise classes with people then, and obviously you're just feeling as if you're contributing to something. Okay. The emotional benefits now is just feelings, basically. So how do we feel when we attend exercise classes? Okay, so you could put here that you have more self-worth. Okay, you're more confident, you have better mental health, okay, so you can deal with your problems in a better way. You could talk about perhaps you're demonstrating more resilience. You can talk about you're in a better mood, you're perhaps happier. Talk about just get rid of this. Get rid of this before. You can talk about there is a mental distraction for you. It's calming, and you're less likely to have anxiety or worry. Okay, so again, there's too many answers there. Okay, but I'm just trying to give you enough options so that you're confident with how you could approach a question like this, and also then with having enough content to help you with your understanding. Okay. Okay, moving on then to the next part of the factors that can affect our growth and development. Okay, so I've left the physical aspects behind now. Okay, I've left the exercise aspect behind. We're now looking at the social and emotional factors. Okay, so we need to be aware of how our gender can affect us, the family, and what families we actually belong to and how they can affect us. Different types of relationships, whether we've suffered from ACEs in the past, so adverse childhood experiences, whether we've suffered from abuse, our educational experiences, whether we have a job, and then obviously cultural and racial diversity. Okay, so my hope is in the next 10 minutes that I will get through all of these factors, and then we can visit an exam question based on topics within this area. Okay, so if we're looking at gender, okay, we need to be aware of perhaps stereotypes. We need to be aware of gender inequality, transgender, and the effects perhaps of the traditional attitudes on individuals who come across as gay, lesbian, transgender, just to ensure that we can appreciate the effects that these traditional attitudes can have on those individuals. Okay. Also families. Now, we all obviously belong to a certain type of family. There are 7 types of families that we need to be aware of, and then perhaps you will be asked to identify what family a person belongs to in a perhaps case study. So if we don't know the 7 types of families, we're going to struggle perhaps with that 1 marker. And then what you normally see then is a continued question in terms of, if you belong to this family, how would this affect you? Okay, so first of all, do we know what the 7 types of families are? Okay, if we don't, I've tried to put this in a simple code for you, just because I find that retrieving this information is far easier than perhaps just learning them off the top of your heart. So my code is soon, few, and then these stand for, obviously, we can belong to a step family, we can belong to a 1-parent family, a 1-gender family, a nuclear family, a foster or adoptive family, an extended family, or perhaps I family without children. Okay, so I'm hoping that you understand the meanings of the families, because obviously there's no point knowing the 7 types of families unless you know what they actually are. The one that I normally get asked more often than not is, Miss, what's a nuclear family? Okay, so that's your most traditional family where you have a mum and dad. Obviously, we have a one-parent family, just perhaps because parents may have split up and you don't see the other parents at all. Or maybe, obviously, unfortunately, there's been a loss and you're just raised, for example, by your mum or dad. And then foster and adoptive, obviously foster is more of a temporary measurement, where adoptive is more long-term. Extended then can be with your grandparents, with perhaps your aunties, uncles, so family members who are further afield. And then obviously there are individuals who don't have children, perhaps out of choice, or perhaps because they're not able to have children themselves. So what you need to be perhaps put up with here are the positive and negative effects of each type of family. Like I said, you're just going to have maybe a case study of an individual, and then you're expected to know what type of family they belong to, and then how this could perhaps help them or be disadvantageous to them. Okay. A way of perhaps revising this yourselves could be perhaps to create a mind map. So you've got the 7 types of families in perhaps a little spider diagram, and then coming out of each type of family, then you could have one pen which is green for the positive effects and then the negative effects, and just making something that's a little bit more creative again. Okay, we need to look then at the different types of relationships that exist. Again, I have a code for this. So we have friends, in terms of a friend relationship, we have family relationships, we have our close and personal relationships, and also work relationships. Now, obviously, the different types of relationship depends on the age of the individual in the case study. So, for example, I wouldn't be expecting to talk about a 6-year-old who has a close and personal relationship or a work relationship in that matter. Okay. Again, what I'm looking for are you confident with the positive and negative effects of each type of relationship? So this could be another piece of paper next door to your different types of families. I've got 4 different types of relationships. Again, red for negative effects, and then green for positive effects of these relationships. Unfortunately then, depending on your relationships and families, okay, possibly you're an individual who has been abused or suffered abuse. Okay, I have a code for this as well, so we can remember the 5 types of abuse, which is spend. And individuals obviously can suffer from sexual, physical, emotional neglect and domestic abuse. And we need to be confident with the different types of abuse. Okay. There are then adverse childhood experiences, or what we call our ACEs. Okay, so ACEs are a traumatic experience that occur before the age of 18 and are remembered then throughout adulthood. So normally the effects of ACEs are apparent during adolescence then and adulthood. Unfortunately, it's not just something that an individual experiences during childhood and then it ends. There are normally long-term effects to these. The normal long-term effects are an individual would be abusive themselves, so they would continue in the pattern that they were abused in. They would possibly have a heavy use of alcohol and drugs, and they would neglect and abuse people then, like I said, as they grew up themselves, as they were young. Okay, there's actually a very good video on YouTube that you can watch in both English and Welsh about traumatic experience that this boy actually suffered himself, and then it shows him as a teenager at 16 years of age, and then also as an adult, and how his life followed in similar steps, but how this could have been avoided. So that's probably the best way that I would go about revising the ACEs, to be honest. Okay, I won't actually show this to you now, just because you can do that in your own time. Educational experiences then, obviously the hope is that they're all positive for everybody. Okay, we have better future choices, we can have good qualifications, we can start employment on higher levels, and we've got an opportunity to be employed or perhaps go on to be have an apprenticeship, just because our education experience was positive. Unfortunately, that's not the case for everybody. There are negative effects perhaps for educational experiences. Perhaps individuals bullied, for example, and they could worry about attending school, fall behind, not perform well in their GCSEs, perhaps be down about that, and then not have such good career opportunities compared to everybody else. So again, just make sure you're confident with how educational experiences can affect individuals. If I had a job then, okay, the positive effects of having a job, in terms of I have a structure, I have an income, obviously, I can spend money on perhaps nicer things in life and go away on holidays. I'm proud of my achievements, and I'm just generally just happy that I have a job, okay, less stress. Also negative effects, okay, so you can miss family members, perhaps you're working unsociable hours, and you don't get to take children to school, for example. You have a lot of stress that comes from work. You're finding it hard to find a balance in terms of work and personal life. You're very tired. You don't prioritise yourself. You could eat unhealthily just because you haven't got time to prepare food, for example. And then cultural diversity. So with cultural diversity, are we aware of perhaps different cultures and diversities that can exist then? This could be very rewarding to individuals in terms of, sorry, connection is spelled wrong there, I've just realised that. They perhaps have a structure, they've got to abide by certain rules, they have to attend certain perhaps religious celebrations, they might have to dress in a certain way, and they feel a belonging and self-worth because of this culture. And obviously there's negative effects then depending on whether you actually agree with the rules you have to confide by. There may be conflict and restrictions in your life in terms of what you can do, what you can't, how do you dress, where do you go, what activities you can attend or perhaps participate in. Okay, so that's quite a broad area in itself. Okay, but it's just worth you perhaps having a look at those in your own time. I'd like to finish today on the question which is regarding Sana as a 16-year-old. She has started studying in college, and there are students from a variety of cultures who attend the college. Discuss how mixing with students from different cultures will affect an individual's development. Okay. Now, again, if we go back to what I previously said with questions, okay, the first thing that we're looking at is perhaps can we think of pies and can we think of positive and negative? Now, in this question, it doesn't say positive or negative, it just says will affect an individual's development. So that effect could be a positive one and a negative one. So what's really nice here is we haven't got to eliminate any of our options. We can basically apply any answer to this question. Okay, so after we've got the correct structure, okay, what I've done here is given you relevant examples on the physical answers. Okay, so we could be eating food from different cultures, and perhaps this stops me participating in certain activities, especially perhaps if my clothing, okay, prevents me from doing certain things. Maybe there are rules in terms of how perhaps I have to apply myself and an activity wouldn't be suited to that. Maybe there are physical problems in terms of growth and development, energy levels, sleep patterns because of Ramadan, okay, and if I'm young, if I'm a child, this possibly could affect my physical growth and possibly physical development in terms of perhaps gross and fine motor skills on a temporary basis. Okay, the intellectual benefits then, we learn about perhaps languages, religions, rules, beliefs, celebrations, currency. Maybe we have an opportunity to travel, and we increase our understanding of the diversity that exists within our culture, and that can help me then with my academic understanding. And emotionally then, perhaps we understand the feelings of others, we have more respect and self-value towards others, self-confidence, We are aware of other people and their identity, and perhaps not to be as judgmental of individuals that we see within our society, especially in a college where we're talking about a 16-year-old individual. And then social benefits, this could be a positive or negative. So we have events and celebrations to attend, perhaps it broadens my friendship circle, I have more people to engage with, more experiences, more opportunities to travel, and more social awareness. Obviously, we could look here at not being able to attend other things my friends are doing. Maybe they are going somewhere and I have to, for example, go to the mosque or perhaps go to church. And this can restrict my social circle to a certain degree as well. Okay. So I appreciate that there's been quite a lot of information tonight, but hopefully with the exam questions that I've used, that's kind of helped you in terms of how to go about making a structure for the more extended questions. And then next week, then we will look more at the factors that can affect our ourselves in terms of immunisation, so the preventative measures that we can put in place to ensure good health in the future. Thank you very much.